Is it realistic to think that the UK can protect its citizens abroad and prevent a Tunisian tragedy in the future?
We'll come to the nature of the response a bit later, perhaps. Jeremy Corbyn.
What happened was tragic beyond belief, and our heart goes out to all those that have lost loved ones there. We also should thank those people in Tunisia that did so much to try and help and protect and support people that were under threat at that time. I was in Tunisia twice last year, and there's a whole feeling and a wish there that a predominantly young country wants to develop into a democracy, wants to develop into a place that respects human rights and wants to go forward. But tragically, there are very many unemployed young people. There is a process of austerity going on. There are problems there. I think we need to support Tunisia in what it's doing and what it's trying to develop into. What happened was tragic, but we have to do our best to protect people, but also to look at the causes of many issues across the whole region, which have led some people into the dreadful path of going down that, of killing people and believing somehow or other that leads them into some sort of salvation. Of course it does not.
Douglas Murray, is it realistic to think the UK can protect its citizens abroad?
No, but we can't protect British citizens. The British government and security services can't protect British citizens all the time. They can do as much as they can at home and abroad, and I think they've got the capabilities they need to do that. But, you know, the nature of terrorism is that it chooses targets in such a way that it tends to choose weak targets. It's the nature of terrorism. It goes for people precisely in things like this, on a beach, enjoying a holiday. It's one of the wicked things about terrorism, but it's one of the things that makes it effective as well. And I think we have to be very careful in our response not to play into the terrorists' hands. You know, the terrorists want to ruin Tunisia on this occasion in particular, ruin the tourist economy of Tunisia, which is so important to that country, a country which is perhaps the only success story of the events called the Arab Spring. But one thing I would say, though, is that there's something which happened this week which I do think needs to be flagged up. On Monday, the Prime Minister got into a hermeneutic battle with the BBC about what we call these terrorists. He said they shouldn't be called ISIS, they shouldn't be called Islamic State. This is a big mistake, I would suggest. All of the linguistic wordplay aside, first of all, it doesn't help. We never called the IRA the so-called IRA, and the Islamic State is the Islamic State. It is what it says it is. It's what it claims to be. It's very Islamic, and it claims to be a state. Calling it ISIL, which was one of the other suggestions of the Prime Minister, is ludicrous, because ISIL simply means the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Another suggestion was Daesh. Well, Daesh is just the Arabic for the same thing, for Islamic State. And
you're not going to get rid of it, whatever by changing its name, are you?
Exactly.
So why bother?
Exactly. So this is why I wanted to raise it, was because when the Prime Minister said this, it seemed to me to be a demonstration of weakness. It is not the role of the Prime Minister of this country to tell the BBC what the Islamic State should be called, and nor is it the role of the Prime Minister to get into that kind of wordplay. It should be the role of the Prime Minister, I think, to say 30 British citizens were killed in cold blood. Now, Britain, as a state, should respond to that very forcefully.
Islamic State is really no respecter of borders of any kind.
So where are you going to bomb,
if you bomb now, then, and it doesn't work, are you then going to put ground forces in? If that doesn't work, what are you going to do? Occupy the whole country? We've got to think through the policies we've been following for the past 15 years in Afghanistan, Iraq and Libya. Are they not a contributory factor in the collapse of so much all across the whole region?
Very briefly, I think where we are with that is a kind of whataboutery. And I am certainly not going to sit here, Jeremy, and say to you that nobody has ever made a mistake in foreign policy or in intervention.
Huge mistake.
No,
pretty catastrophic mistake.
Yes, but you've got it in the wrong order.
All right, Jeremy,
what would your proposal before the intervention?
What would your proposal be? I'll come to you, Douglas, and then I will come to the members of the audience, I promise I would.
First of all, you recognise the needs of people in the region, including the Kurdish people and others. Secondly, you recognise that we've made some catastrophic mistakes in the bombing that we've done in so many other places, and we've encouraged the growth of some of these groups, not intentionally, but they've been a factor within that. And you develop a foreign policy which supports people and tries to attract them away from the purposes of ISIL, and also you have respect for all faiths, all religions and all communities, and you try and reduce the level of Islamophobia and racism within our own society and around the world. I think those are some factors, but it's not going to be simple, it's not going to be quick, but I'm not convinced that bombing from 30,000 feet is actually going to do anything other than make the situation rather worse. There's already a four-way civil war in Syria.
I think they are a state. I think they're very well funded. I think they're very well armed. I think we do need to bomb them. We cause some of the problems, I agree. But we still need to bomb them. We need to fight back. And we need to do something. Where do those arms come from? It doesn't matter where it came from. What does it matter where it comes from? It's there. It's there. And given the chance, they would happily walk across and do it here. Happily. And they will sacrifice themselves. As far as the guy in Tunisia fought, he's now in paradise. He would have completely, 100% believed that he would die a martyr and is off to paradise. That's ridiculous to me. It's ridiculous to the audience. But that guy would be happy in the knowledge that he's going to be shot. He wasn't hiding. He didn't run in, try and shoot someone, run away. He went in, happily strolled about shooting people. It's a disgrace that we're not doing more. We should be fighting them on the ground. We should do all we can to eradicate this group. It's crazy.
A couple of quick points. First of all, this kind of action predates our recent interventions in the region. In 1996, something very similar to what happened the other day happened at Luxor in Egypt, where a group of Swiss tourists were massacred and beheaded at the sites there. That was before 9/11, before Afghanistan and Iraq. That needs to be said. Secondly, we did not intervene in Syria. We cannot blame ourselves every time we do intervene and every time we don't. We did not intervene in Syria. This country, the Labour Party decided not to enforce the red lines when Assad used chemical weapons. We did not intervene there, and ISIS, as a result, among other things, of the fact that Syria has broken apart and neither we nor any other country knows what to do about it. It is a huge problem. It is not a simple one. But very, very quick. But very quickly. Look, there was no decent plan in Syria at that point. This is why it was not an appropriate thing to do. But look, let's just get back to the point on this. The fact is that there is no border now between Syria and Iraq. There is something ludicrous about forces from the region and outside the region bombing an ISIS camp when it is on the Iraqi side of the border, but not when it's on the Syrian side of the border.
That point. Jeremy Hunt.
Well, two brief points. I have great respect for the integrity that other Jeremy expresses his views, but I disagree with him that this is about foreign policy. 9/11 happened before Iraq, before Afghanistan. Foreign policy is an excuse. This is about an ideology. These people think that you can't be British and Muslim at the same time. They think that girls shouldn't go to school. They think that women should stay at home. And we have to combat the ideology. And I do actually, I'm afraid, disagree with you, Douglas, about the name being irrelevant. It is not an Islamic state. It's not a state, and it's a perversion of Islam. I'll tell you what is an Islamic state, and that's Tunisia. And we need to be supporting the people that are real Islamic states, the very brave people who formed human chains to protect British tourists when we had the atrocity last week. We need to get behind them. We need to get behind British Muslims who are as outraged as this, and we need to support them in fighting this ideology at source.
What about fighting IS at source?
That is very important, and that is part of...
Do you believe that's possible? Do you believe it's possible to destroy them on the ground?
Well, the Defence Secretary has said today that he thinks we need to re-look at the case for bombing in Syria because the situation internationally has changed and Parliament has changed. We have to carry the British people with us on such an important thing. But I do say this. I think in the end, these people thrive on our weakness. And the big decision we have to take is they stand up for what they believe in. Are we going to stand up for what we believe in?
Which weaknesses, Jeremy? Hold on, let him just finish.
No,
what are the weaknesses you're talking about?
If they think that, you know, the West is not going to deal in a robust way with what they do,
what do you mean by that?
Well, if
what
they
is a
think
robust
we're not
way of dealing with it?
Well, taking them on at source, taking them on in their home country, tackling the ideology that they espouse, making sure we support the intelligence services. There are things that we're doing now, and then there are more things that we will consider in future.
Should teachers be responsible for monitoring their students for signs of radicalisation?
Should teachers be responsible for monitoring students for signs of radicalisation? Jeremy Corbyn.
But if you say to teachers, somebody makes a assumed radicalish remark and then report it to the police or report it to somebody else, what actually happens? What happens in that relationship between the teacher and the student? what happens when somebody, a child or a student, makes a homophobic remark? Is that followed up? Is that when they make a racist remark, they make an anti-Christian remark, anti-Muslim remark, or anything else? I think we have to, first of all, can I finish a minute? We've got to respect what teachers do and they're trying to do. They have a very important pastoral care role of supporting people. If you put them all down in a box saying you've got to report X, Y, and Z, it's not easy. They've got to spot child abuse amongst young children. They may have to contact social services if that's going on. But if you say the only thing you've got to look for is Islamic extremism and report that to the police, I think you've got to be